finally, all the burden is gone. From today, I'll be living with my parents at my place. Just as my parents passed away, my husband, who had demolished our family home, said this to me as I stood dumbfounded in front of where our house used to be. What are you talking about? Have you lost your mind too? Hurry up and bring the inheritance over to our house. I couldn't help but burst into laughter at those words. I see. So that's what this was about. What? Why are you laughing? You guys don't know? Know what? Michael and my in-laws looked at me quizzically as I laughed. That's when I told them the truth. My name is Jane McGill. I was born as the eldest daughter to ordinary salaried worker parents. I have one brother, Dan. A very normal family. At the age of 29, I married Michael and we had 2 children. I juggled work and child rearing, and before I knew it, I was already 55. My eldest son, Shane, and my eldest daughter, Amy, have grown up and become respectable members of society. Now, they are living on their own, struggling with their new jobs. From now on, I thought I could take it easy with my husband. It was an ordinary life, but it was happy. I suppose we'll just continue to age like this. That ordinary life changed completely one winter's day. My father was involved in a traffic accident and suddenly passed away. At the time, my father was still 72 years old. The sudden loss of my father plunged our family into deep sorrow. Especially my mother, who became so depressed that she couldn't even eat. Mom, I understand you're sad, but you have to eat. I repeatedly told this to my mother. I know, but I just don't have the appetite. It feels like there's something stuck in my chest. Dan and I thought it was just her being emotional and watched her for a while. However, within just half a month, my mother's weight drastically decreased. Finding this strange, I took her to the hospital. What? Cancer? I was shocked by the diagnosis the doctor gave us. It was advanced, and surgery was not an option, with only about a year left to live. I hadn't even been able to do anything for my parents yet. Just when I thought we had only lost my father, now my mother was going through this. I was more devastated than when my father passed away. However, there was no time to keep mourning. DANR lived far away and couldn't be relied upon. So, it was up to me to take care of my mother. I immediately told Michael that I wanted to live with my mother. I couldn't leave my sick mother alone, both emotionally and physically. But Michael's reaction was not what I expected. Huh? We just finished the funeral. And now I have to be bothered with one of your parents again? Michael said with a sigh, as if it was a hassle. You don't have to say it like that. Isn't it enough to just drive her to and from the hospital? Do we really have to live together? I think she would feel lonely. If you're not okay with it, maybe I could just live at my parents' house for a while? Hearing this, Michael reacted indignantly. Huh? And who's going to take care of my meals during that time? Of course, I'll come home to make them. What about cleaning up? Who's going to do the cleaning? And the laundry? I fell silent. I intended to do what I could, but I wouldn't be able to manage everything as before. It hurt to be criticized like that. Being told that wanting to help and care for my mother was just my selfishness. I had nothing to say in return. Surely my mother would insist on being okay with how things were, out of consideration. But I really wanted to do something for my parents. Fine, but I won't help with anything, you hear me? Michael reluctantly agreed to my offer of helping my mom. His attitude was arrogant, but in the end, he gave in. I'm sorry for the trouble. And thank you. Though I thought it was terrible of him, the fact that he agreed to my request was true. Suppressing my desire to retort, I thanked him. Despite some disagreements, Michael and I started living with my mother at my parents' house. We originally lived in a house Michael's company owned. Michael was an only child. Especially since his father wanted to live with us, there were no plans to buy our own home. And we were supposed to live with his parents eventually. Living in the company housing was more convenient for commuting. And the rent was about $400 a month, which wasn't a big burden. But moving to my parents' house eliminated that payment, and we got a bigger house. I think the cohabitation wasn't all disadvantages for Michael. Although Michael didn't help as he had declared, I was glad to be living with my mother. She seemed well, but she often felt weak and spent a lot of time lying down during the day. I prepared meals for my mother, fed her, and managed her medication. It would have been impossible for her to do it all by herself. I'm sorry, Jane. Thank you. It's a big help having you here. I have to thank Michael too. My mother repeatedly expressed her gratitude to us. I hadn't told her about Michael's harsh words during the discussion about moving in. So she was grateful to Michael as well. One day, after my mother went to bed, Michael came home. As I served him dinner, I brought up the topic of my mother's treatment. Michael glared at me and refused even to listen, saying, "I don't know what you want me to do. I told you I wouldn't help with anything." I, too, had moments of weakness and things I wanted to discuss. All I wanted from Michael was for him to listen. But even as 1 month passed, then too, his attitude remained unchanged. He constantly complained about living together, acting as if he was doing something grand by doing so. And his behavior only got worse day by day. However, I couldn't say anything in response. The stress of worrying about my mother and being considerate of Michael kept building up. When the 1-year prognosis approached, my mother's condition rapidly worsened. And she was hospitalized, passing away 3 days later. Even though I had braced myself, I was deeply affected. Dan's family and my children came to support us, but at times like these, I wished my husband was by my side. However, Michael was laughing with his parents in a corner, not helping with the funeral at all. My brother took on the role of the chief mourner, and we somehow managed to prepare for the funeral. But Michael sat at the very back of the family seats, not in the bereaved family section as expected. "Michael, I wish you would sit in the family area." When I said this, Michael responded, "No, I'm fine here. I'm not a blood relative after all." "But you are my husband." Then my mother-in-law chimed in. "He's your husband, but he's not your mother's son. Michael is my son, so he's an outsider, a complete outsider." My father-in-law added, "That's right. Michael's parents are us. Jane, you should sit in the bereaved section." Being told this even by my in-laws, I was silenced. While customs might vary by region, in our area, it's common for sons-in-law to sit in the bereaved family section. As expected, the absence of Michael from the bereaved family section led distant relatives to whisper, wondering if we had divorced. It was a situation that could have been avoided if Michael had just sat there. Despite feeling dissatisfied with Michael not being by my side, we managed to send my mother off. After the funeral, we returned home with my brother's family, my children, Michael, and my in-laws. "Thank you for taking the time to come, John and Mary." I expressed my gratitude to my in-laws and served them tea. They laughed and said, "Really, it's been tough with the funeral expenses for both your father and now your mother." I was stunned by their words. I couldn't believe what they were saying. I forced a smile and excused myself. Then, I overheard Michael talking with his parents. "It must have been hard for you, Michael, living with someone who's practically a stranger." "Yeah, dealing with Jane's whims was too much. There's no good in being henpecked. As a husband, you should be able to say no to things you don't like." I clenched my fists. Their laughing voices were unbearable, filled with disdain. But this was nothing new. My in-laws and Michael had always been insensitive and rude. When I married Michael, Mary said, "Couldn't you find someone more attractive? I can't expect much for grandchildren." John added, "They say beauty fades. With Jane, that's unlikely to happen." Michael laughed along, finding it funny. Such were the disrespectful attitudes of this family. I felt something snap inside me. Reflecting back, neither my in-laws nor Michael had ever offered me a word of comfort during my father's funeral or after my mother's passing. Instead, they ridiculed me. I had felt guilty for imposing the living situation on Michael. But I began to question his behavior as a person. I had focused too much on my mother and on accommodating Michael. If Michael had been supportive, I might have felt differently. But there was no reason for me to feel guilty towards someone who was anything but supportive. As my anger simmered, Michael continued to laugh and chat with his parents as if nothing was wrong. Fortunately, Dawn family and my children were in the kitchen, unaware of the insensitive conversation, providing me with some relief. Then, I heard my mother-in-law's voice calling for me. "Jane?" "Yes?" I responded, startled. "Can I have this?" She approached with my mother's purse in hand. Confused, I said, To which she replied, "Your mother won't be needing it anymore, will she?" Michael suggested we take it home. "Maybe I'll just take it." She examined the purse as if appraising it, utterly disregarding the fact that the funeral had just ended. I took the purse back and firmly said, "No." "What?" Her expression changed, not because I took the purse, but because I, her daughter-in-law, had defied her. Yet, I stood my ground. "We're not ready to sort through my mother's belongings yet. We'll distribute keepsakes among family members later." My mother-in-law became furious. "What do you mean? Are you saying I'm an outsider? Didn't you just say at the funeral that to my mother, even Michael is an outsider? How can you be considered family when even Michael is not?" I couldn't help but retort. Michael and John turned red with anger. "What are you saying? Apologize to my mom. How dare you speak like that, being just a housewife?" The commotion caught everyone's attention, and they gathered around. "After all we've done, attending the funeral and burial, I never thought we'd be called strangers. Let's go home." She yelled at me in front of everyone and left our home. Michael, too, left angrily with his parents. "What happened? Did you really call your mother-in-law a stranger?" Hearing only Mary's side, everyone seemed to think I was in the wrong. But I explained the situation to them, and no one blamed me. Grandma and Grandpa should consider other people's feelings more. Dad's the same. They've always been like that. My children stood by me, but I couldn't forgive those three. Michael didn't come home for a while, and I didn't reach out to him. I didn't think I should apologize, nor did I feel I could forgive him even if he did. However, we couldn't go on like this forever. One day, Michael came home. "Welcome back." Despite my rising anger upon seeing him, I greeted him. Michael then said something unexpected. "It's been tough, hasn't it?" His gruff concern caught me off guard. "Take the kids and go on a trip. It might be a good change of pace." He handed me travel vouchers. I couldn't find the words. Instead, tears started to spill out. Maybe the kids were behind this. But even if that were the case, I was happy Michael went along with it. I immediately contacted the kids to plan the trip, just like he suggested. "Huh? Dad did? Guess there's a first time for everything." But the kids seemed surprised by my suggestion. It seemed like it really was a present from Michael. Did Michael feel bad for me? I said, laughing. And so, I gratefully accepted the travel vouchers from Michael. Well then, I'll be off.
Yeah.
Take it easy. Since you're at it, stay over at the kids' places too. Hey? I can't possibly be away that long. It's fine. I'll be relaxing at my parents', so don't worry about me. Michael sent me off with those words. Amy happily welcomed me, so before the trip, I visited Amy's and Shane's place. Since I hadn't been able to visit them at all while taking care of Mom, I helped out a bit with their housework, like making meal preps. Mom, you're not relaxing at all. But thanks, this really helps. Both were delighted to eat my cooking at their homes. This was all thanks to Michael's suggestion. Then came the long-awaited resort hotel trip. I spent a relaxing time at the resort with the kids. I felt like the weariness from caregiving and the sadness of parting with my parents were somewhat healed. Though I ended up being away for almost a week. Both kids returned to their homes with bright smiles. That was fun. We should thank Dad once in a while. Really, once in a while. But do you think he's up to something? Amy laughed as if it was a joke. Don't say things like that. Dad did think this through in his own way. I laughed too. Thinking of sharing lots of memories with Michael. And looking forward to a happy life together as a couple, I headed home. But when I arrived, I was at a loss for words. What? The house is? I looked around frantically, confirming my location. Despite recognizing the place, the home that should have been there was gone. Then, out of nowhere, Michael appeared. Behind him were his parents, smirking as they looked at me standing there dumbfounded. Michael. What's going on? I asked Michael. Like his parents, he too had an unpleasant smile on his face. Finally, all the baggage is gone. From today, I'll be living with my parents at my place. What are you talking about? Michael arrogantly declared. I calmly countered. Then, Michael opened his mouth. Have you lost your mind too? Your family home is already demolished. Hurry up and bring the inheritance over to our house. Everything you inherited is Michael's now, you know. I see. It was clear that the disappearance of the home was Michael's doing. And it was for the inheritance. After thinking about our future and coming back to this, what a betrayal. I was so frustrated and sad. But demolishing the house would not make things go as Michael wished. No way, I thought. As I burst into laughter at the smirking faces of the three, they looked puzzled. What? What's so funny? What a weird woman. Have you gone mad? She looked at me as if I were something creepy. Facing the three of them, I spoke up. You guys don't know? What are you talking about? I told Michael. First of all, I didn't inherit a single cent. So, there's no inheritance. After saying that, I started laughing again. Maybe they mistook me for someone who had become wealthy from an inheritance. Their baseless assumptions and actions were just too funny. What? Explain yourself. Michael demanded. But I chose to keep my mouth shut. I saw no need to enlighten them.
Yeah.
But before that, I'm not going to live with strangers. Ignoring Michael's questions and rejecting his initial suggestion, Mary flew into a rage. You helped your own parents with housework, but you won't help us. You know there was a reason for that, right? I agreed to live together, didn't I? I said I didn't need to live together. Did you forget choosing to live together because you didn't want to do housework? Michael and my mother-in-law bit their lips as I countered each point. And demolishing my family home without permission. There are things you just can't do. I yelled at them right there and then left the scene. Behind me, Michael's voice followed, where do you think you're going? But I didn't look back. I had to find a place to sleep that night, and I truly didn't want to see Michael's face. I immediately consulted a lawyer. Demolishing a house couldn't be that simple. The house was still in my mother's name. As I wondered who took on the job, an unbelievable truth came to light. Michael and his father had demolished it themselves. They had prepared thoroughly, enlisting help from a demolition worker acquaintance of my father-in-law, and renting heavy machinery. Furthermore, they even gifted me travel vouchers to get rid of me. The realization of being so easily deceived was almost enough to bring me to tears. And I was overwhelmed with frustration. Is there any way to punish the three of them? I asked the lawyer through tears, and he smiled kindly at me. Since Michael demolished a house under your mother's name without permission, he can be charged with property damage and sued for compensation. Let's start by demanding a proper apology from Michael and his parents. I nodded at his words. The lawyer immediately began the proceedings. A few days later, Michael called me furiously. What's with this certified letter? Oh, did you get it? You destroyed an important house of mine. You have to compensate for that. Compensate? We said we were moving into the family home. We demolished a house that no one was going to live in. You should be thanking us instead. Now, bring the inheritance and come back home. Michael arrogantly spat out those words. Destroyed it without permission and expect gratitude, huh? Don't make me laugh. And, bring the inheritance and come home. How can there be an inheritance when I haven't inherited anything? I yelled back at him over the phone. Michael fell silent, seemingly intimidated by my anger, unusual for me to express. The reason I laughed when the house was demolished was precisely this. I had a whole year to discuss inheritance matters with my mother. It was clear what my choice was. I don't need anything. Gave it all to my brother. As a result, all the cash and securities were inherited by my brother. He said that if that were the case, I should have the house since he lived far away and couldn't manage it. If I didn't live there, it could even be rented out. So, it was planned that I would inherit the house. Anyway, either you and your father restore the family home to its original state. Or if that's not possible, pay the amount listed. This amount. I'm considering a settlement out of goodwill. But fine. If you can't pay, I'll file a complaint and sue. I stated my position firmly. Sorry, I didn't think you'd get so angry. Of course, I'd be angry, why wouldn't I? Michael started making excuses. He seemed to think that as long as the family home existed, he couldn't live with his parents as he wanted. Especially since his father had always wanted to live together. He liked my brother and wanted to live with him. Michael was the one who refused to live together because it would make his commute difficult. But his parents seemed to think I was the one who didn't want it. So, he convinced his parents by forcefully demolishing my family home and taking the inheritance to make me move in with them. But now, hearing this, forgiveness was out of the question. So, please forgive me. I didn't mean any harm. My dad is regretting it too. If you're truly sorry, then accept the settlement, I said and hung up the phone. Michael kept calling and messaging me to apologize. If you're sorry, then hurry up and transfer the money. I pushed Michael away. I knew the family home couldn't be restored. But there was nothing else I could do to process my feelings. Afterward, I stayed at Amy's place. My brother's family and my children were all aware of this. My brother, although furious that our family home had been demolished without consent, said, I won't say anything, but I'll lend a hand. Jane, do what you want. Everyone condemned Michael's actions and supported me. A month passed without any compensation or damages paid. During that time, there was no contact from Michael. I couldn't keep relying on Amy forever. I wanted to receive the money quickly and at least establish a living foundation. Contrary to my wishes, something unbelievable happened. It was revealed by a single comment from Amy. "This apron kind of looks like Grandma's." While muttering, Amy showed me her smartphone screen. I was shocked when I saw it. It was a product page on a flea market ad. The apron Amy said looked like my mother's was actually a unique item I made for her. What? "This is Grandma's apron. I made it, so there's no mistake." "What?" Amy said, hurrying to check other listings. The seller seemed to have recently registered, with no transactions or ratings yet. There were nearly 30 items listed for sale, and shockingly, they all belonged to my mother. I immediately realized it. It was Michael's doing. No one else but Michael, who had demolished the house, could have taken my mother's belongings. I immediately called Michael. "What's with that flea market?" "What are you doing?" "Flea market?" Michael sounded annoyed. Furious at his feigned ignorance, I lashed out. "Don't play dumb. You're selling my mom's belongings without permission, aren't you? Cancel the listings right now." Then, Michael started to panic. "What? No, it wasn't me. Who else would do such a thing then? I'm coming over to get everything back right now." I hung up and immediately headed to Michael's parents' house with Amy. "Where are my mother's belongings?" Upon arriving, I called out for Michael and confronted him at the entrance. "I don't know anything about it, Dad. Just tell the truth." Amy supported me, pressing Michael for answers. He looked flustered. Soon, his parents noticed our presence and came out. "Oh, Amy, you're here?" She seemed pleased to see Amy, smiling warmly. "Grandma, make Dad tell the truth." "The truth?" "It seems like Dad has been selling stuff that belonged to Grandma." At Amy's words, Mary laughed. Michael, looking troubled, insisted, "I really didn't do it." Then, Mary exclaimed loudly, "Michael's selling them? That can't be true." "But, because I'm the one selling them." I felt my blood run cold at her words. Michael seemed aware of it, giving a "this is bad" look towards his mother. Despite Amy's shock, Mary remained cheerful. "What did you say?" "It's quite a hassle, you know? Packaging has to be done carefully, and the photos need to be good." It was as if she was completely unaware that she was selling stolen items. Speaking about the ad with excitement. "Cancel the listings. Those aren't yours to sell." Amy, now red with anger and tears, pleaded to Mary. However, she seemed annoyed. "What's the big deal? I finally found a hobby I enjoy. If it looks useful, I use it. If not, it's a little pocket money for me. And it's good for preventing dementia. I'm the only grandma left, so you want me to stay healthy and live long, right?" She spoke as if what she was doing was perfectly fine, showing no signs of remorse. If talking doesn't work, action is the only option left. "Let's go, Amy." "But it's okay. Let's go." I led Amy out of the house and straight to the police station. I hadn't planned on filing a complaint for the house demolition, but theft was a different matter. Upon consulting the police about the stolen and sold belongings, the flea market app quickly took action, and the mother-in-law's account was suspended. At least that prevented further sales, providing some relief. On the way back from the police station, I called Michael. "Your mother's account has been suspended. You knew about this, didn't you? That makes you complicit." "No. Also, I've filed a complaint. Please cooperate with the investigation." Michael panicked at my words. "What? We're family, aren't we? Please withdraw it. Strangers, right? I still haven't received any compensation for the house demolition. Nor do I see any remorse from you. Confronted by my anger, Michael was clearly at a loss. But I'm not heartless. Despite everything, I had lived with Michael for so long, and there were feelings involved. Sighing, I said, I'll wait for the money, but I have no intention of forgiving the theft. I want everything returned. And, by the way, your father looked quite pale. Has he been to the hospital? Huh? I'm not heartless, so I just wanted to pass that on. I left him with those words and hung up. John the First had briefly seen earlier hardly spoke. And looked significantly thinner than he had months before. His complexion was past pale, verging on ghastly. It was clear he wasn't well. But that family probably didn't notice. Mary, cheerfully planning to sell stolen items, and Michael, who only acted big in front of me, lacked any consideration for others. The next day, the father-in-law called me. Expecting maybe a word of thanks, I received the exact opposite. Why are you treating me like a sick person? Trying to dump me in a hospital to get rid of me? I need to protect my wife and Michael from you. I'm not going to any hospital. He scolded me over the phone. To think I was worried about him, what an ungrateful response. I'm sorry for overstepping. I was just concerned. I'm not frail and short-lived like your parents. Don't insult me. Though his words infuriated me, a few days later, he apparently felt off enough to visit a hospital. The diagnosis was terminal cancer. Michael called me in a panic. Dad's got terminal cancer. What do we do? But I snorted. That's not my concern. Remember what you told me when I suggested the hospital? I'm not weak and short-lived like your parents. Deal with it yourself. How can you be so heartless, Jane? Who's the heartless one? Did you ever offer a single word of warmth when my mother was sick? Reflect on your own actions. I ended the call with those final words. Predictably, John passed away not long. Despite everything, I didn't want to hold negative feelings towards someone who had died. But remembering all that had been said and done, I couldn't shed a tear. After the funeral, a will was found. Despite his claims of not being short-lived, John had made careful preparations. The house goes to my grandson, Shane. All other assets are to be divided equally between my wife and eldest son, it read. I was surprised to see Shane's name. John had always favored him, wanting to live together. For Shane, it might have seemed a bothersome inheritance. You should renounce the inheritance. You don't need that house, do you? Though I suggested this to Shane, he was actually happy to inherit the house. Despite the inheritance tax, there seemed to be no benefit for Shane. But if he was happy, it wasn't my place to say anything. As per the will, Shane inherited the house. Mary was pleased, even paying the inheritance tax. It's only natural for our heir, she said. Though I felt a bit down as if Shane was taken from me, an unbelievable event occurred later. Come over to our place. Upon receiving that message from Michael, I immediately went to his parents' house. There, just like I had been once, stood Mary and Michael, staring blankly in front of their home. In front of the site, there were heavy machinery and trucks belonging to a demolition company. And employees tearing down the house. What's happening? It's my house. I can do what I want with it, right? Shane, appearing out of nowhere, looked satisfied watching his parents' house being demolished. Shane. What are you doing? Stop this immediately. Even if I stop now, it's not like anyone can live in it anymore. Shane, what have you done? Mary and Michael pleaded to Shane. But Shane just laughed. Did you forget what Grandpa and Dad did to Mom? Shane. And Grandma, you were terrible to Mom too, right? Did you ever apologize? Shane's smile vanished, replaced with a sharp glare directed at Mary and Michael. Seeing this, they were brought to their knees. The machinery continued to noisily demolish the family home. In that moment, I finally felt a sense of relief. Later, Michael finally paid the damages and compensation with the inherited property. The stolen items Mary had taken from my mother were recovered by Shane and safely returned to me. "You've got me and Amy, Mom," he told me, and I finally allowed myself to cry tears of relief. Having lost their home and left with no money, the mother-in-law and Michael now live in a company house again. The irony of Michael and I moving out from the company housing, and now him and his mother moving back in, became the subject of gossip. After receiving a call from one of Michael's colleagues' wives, curious about what had happened, I shared the story without any falsehoods. They would probably feel awkward living in the company housing from now on. But it was their own doing. Furthermore, after Michael's resignation, the two faced the challenge of saving money to prepare for their future without a home. Occasionally, I think I might share their story with friends as a topic of conversation. I continued to stay with Amy, but then Shane announced he was getting married. He planned to build a new home, helped by the fact that the family home's land sold for a decent amount. It's nice to know that even such a house could be useful in the end. "Mom, let's live together." Shane even invited me to live with them. His fiancée was also very welcoming, which I greatly appreciated. Since I couldn't impose on Amy living alone forever, I decided to accept his offer, determined not to become a mother-in-law like mine. I look forward to living happily with my new family.